Rand Paul just called Chicago
literally a war zone.
I know I and pretty much anyone living in Chicago can tell you that is not true. But you know what is a war zone? Broadview, Illinois, where ICE headquarters its operations in the Chicago area. And we have a chance to stop them. But to do so, we need you, me, all of us, and our elected officials. My name is Abughazaleh. I'm running for Congress in the 9th District of Illinois, and I have been protesting the Broadview processing facility every Friday morning for over a month now. What I can tell you in my time there is that ICE has escalated every single week. ICE has gotten more violent and more bold every single week. So let me tell you why we're out there, what I've seen and experienced, and how we can actually take action, even though it's really easy to feel helpless right now. So the Broadview processing facility, which is located at 1930 Beach Street, is where ICE headquarters its operations in the Chicago area. Because this is a processing facility, people are not supposed to be held here for more than 12 hours at a time. But we've gotten reports of people being held for days or even weeks in this facility, without beds, without hot meals, without hygienic products. We've heard about grandmothers and pregnant women sleeping on the ground, of dozens of people being held in a single cell. One morning I watched as detainees were marched into a van and they were wearing the same clothes they were detained in. And we have no idea how long they were there. Someone in this district actually told me that their relative had been detained by ICE. They were held at Broadview and brought at a facility in a completely different state. And when they called their family, they said that facility in the other state was the first time they had slept on a bed in days. This is why we are protesting. To be clear, this facility isn't new. In fact, a prayer vigil has been held outside this facility every Friday morning for almost 2 decades. But the way ICE has ramped up its operations, from abducting people to subjecting them to these completely inhumane conditions, that is new. And these brazen crimes against humanity is why this facility has gotten more attention in the first place. I cannot speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself. Here is what I have seen there. The first time I went to the Broadview facility was for a vigil this summer. It was pretty tame. We barely saw any officers. In fact, they ordered Uber Eats for dinner and made the driver come inside because they were scared of a bunch of people praying. Then about 5 weeks ago, some protesters joined the weekly vigil. They sat on the public streets of Broadview and refused to move when ICE agents told them to. They were arrested by Broadview PD. This got the attention of a bunch of people, including myself. So I and others joined the next Friday. There was very little escalation this first week. Broadview PD stood on the sidelines, and in fact, when a car tried to come into the facility, protesters forced it to turn around. But we did learn that day that ICE had changed their deportation time from around 8 or 9 a.m. to 5. So we came back the next week at 5 a.m. This was the first time that ICE assaulted me. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the video of an ICE officer throwing me to the ground. That was actually the third time an officer has done this. The first time they did it happened on a public street, yet again. But that wasn't the last escalation of the day. They put men on the roof with long guns. They urged us that they might use lethal munitions against us with this creepy AI voice on a tower. And as a van came in holding detainees who were banging against the door so loud you could see the doors moving, Broadview police protected ICE as they shoved us back. Broadview PD watched and did nothing. When I came back that third week at 5 a.m., I could tell that day would be different. An ICE officer came out and shot pepper balls at the ground as he told us. And around 6 was the second time ICE threw me. They also abducted a protester into the facility. That was the first time that has ever happened. We demanded their release. They said the protester would be released shortly. That did not happen. About 30 minutes later, a van was exiting the facility heading towards a protester, so I went to help that protester, once again on the public streets of Broadview. That was all the provocation an ICE officer needed to drag me, lift me up, and throw me on the concrete. That protest was supposed to be from 7 to 9 a.m., but we weren't leaving without the protester who was abducted. People joined us, and when we demanded their release, ICE brought that protester in chains into a van. They tried to drive the van out, and we, on the public streets of Broadview, said no. That is when ICE continued to try to drive through us. We had to play tug of war with a man's body from keeping him from being abducted. Another man fell in front of the car, his head by the tire, and it is a miracle that we were able to get him up in time. ICE began to shoot us with pepper balls, shooting one man in the face, splitting open his lip so blood was dripping down his chin. They tear gassed us, but they also threw a second canister at the press area. Some people may say this is what happens at protests. I can assure you, as someone who has been at a lot of protests, some of which have been gassed, some of which have had excessive force used by the police, I have never seen anything like this. Many members of the press who have covered intense protests, even riots, have said they have never seen excessive force used like this. And to be clear, none of us were violent. We didn't have weapons. We had songs and chants and posters. I brought my knitting. And this is how ICE treated us. And if this is what they're willing to do to us, to a congressional candidate, in front of press, in front of cameras, imagine what they are doing behind boarded up windows. I am fine, by the way. I still have a bruise on my ass and some on my calves. My hand was a little jacked up, but it's healed fine. But what I really want you to remember is everything we went through doesn't hold a candle to what the detainees in that facility are going through. That is why we are out there in the first place. During the van and tear gas debacle, they also abducted 2 other protesters. And shortly after this, ICE erected a fence on Beach Street, blocking where the facility is. This is a public street. In fact, the Broadview Fire Department has ordered that this fence come down. That hasn't happened yet. And the Broadview PD won't help either. Those first 2 weeks, the one where we had the car turn away and the first time I was thrown on the ground, Broadview PD at least pretended they were going to protect protesters. The third week, the one with that video with the tear gas with the van, they didn't even show up. There wasn't even the guise that our lives mattered. Then this past Friday, we returned. The fence was still up, despite the fire department saying it has to come down. Ambulances and fire trucks cannot use this public street if they are needed. So we found that ICE agents were coming in the facility through another entrance. Broadview PD was there, protecting the agents. They drove in. Almost all of them had out-of-state license plates. Almost all of them were wearing masks, some even sunglasses, even though it was 5 a.m. and the sun wasn't up. And Broadview PD made it clear where their priorities lie. But because this is a public street and there's a public sidewalk, that means there's a crosswalk right there. Protesters were walking. We wanted to see what was on the other end of the sidewalk. An ICE agent in an SUV tried to drive through the crosswalk, tried to drive through people. That is not an exaggeration. He kept driving. And when people were still in front of the car that was driving into their bodies, ICE agents shot them with pepper balls. This situation was much less safe than the area on Beach Street, the public street that is paid for by our tax dollars. It's basically the sidewalk and then a driveway, which is ripe for kettling. That's when officers can surround you on the other side and trap you within their ranks. With no provocation throughout the morning, ICE agents deployed tear gas, flashbangs, pepper balls, and had snipers on a roof to shoot us with rubber bullets. They treated it like a war zone. A war zone where the Geneva Conventions do not apply. And with the fence still blocking off Beach Street, it became clear later that morning that this was an incredibly unsafe position to be in, that ICE was willing to use snipers against protesters exercising their First Amendment rights. This is part of why it is so important to get this fence torn down. It's a fire hazard, and it's putting protesters, press, and the businesses around the ICE facility in danger. In fact, one of those rubber bullets hit the windows of one of those businesses. And then the following night, Saturday, some people protested this facility once again. This was an incredibly dangerous situation. You might have seen my post on this, but I mentioned that this was an extremely high-risk action. So much so that I and some others who have been protesting week after week every Friday morning did not attend. But to be clear, this wasn't just for our personal safety. It was for the safety of others. Other protesters, yes, but also the residents of Broadview. Because ICE has publicly said it is willing to hold the town hostage to keep people from exercising their First Amendment rights. They are willing to put their fellow Americans in danger so they can act with impunity. We are worried about action being taken against the detainees in that facility, not knowing where they're going to go, not knowing how they're being treated. And we're also worried about protesters being killed. It is a miracle that no one died on Saturday night, but that doesn't mean that it was safe. A member of the press who was clearly documenting was arrested. Witnesses said a little girl was arrested. A veteran who was knocked down was arrested. And ICE continued to use chemical weapons against them. This is scary, it is authoritarian, and it will get worse, but it doesn't have to. That's why I need to ask for a favor. We have had some elected officials join us at these protests. The first week I was there, that number was 0. Then it was 1. Then it was 3. Then I think it was 5 or 6 this week. But when elected officials and higher profile people attend these protests, it makes everyone safer. And it puts pressure, not just in the public eye, but from a political and legal standpoint on this facility. This Friday at
9 a.m.,
we will be holding a press conference at 1930 Beach Street in Broadview, Illinois. We need as many elected officials and as many people in general to turn out. I know it's early, but come. And if you can't, or even if you can, contact your elected officials. You can find a link in my bio that has templates for emails and voicemails to leave for your elected officials. And we need them at all levels of government, not just representatives and senators, both at the state and federal level, but also at the local level. Contact every single elected official you know and tell them to come to Broadview, 1930 Beach Street, 7 a.m. this Friday morning. Tell them this fence needs to be torn down. Tell them we need transparency for what is happening in that facility. And tell them it needs to be their highest priority to stand for and preserve all of our rights. Do they stand with the people or do they stand with ICE? This is really fucking scary. There is no other way about it. But this is what fascism does. And there are more of us than there are of them. So this Friday,
9 a.m.,
1930 Beach Street. I hope to see you there. And I hope our leaders are there too. Thanks for watching, and fuck ICE.